Transmission begins.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Josh Tolley Show on the GCN Radio Network.
You know, we were just talking about part of that indoctrination was the school system. Let us educate your children. And we think for some reason that those days are long gone by. That, you know, hey, now is this wonderful time where everything is just hunky-dory and, you know, just send all of our kids to schools. I have had a teacher tell me to my face that teachers are trained on how to raise children. Parents are not. So the teacher should have more authority and more control than the parents. He told me that to my face. So what sort of state of education are we in? To talk about that, we have Alex Newman. He's one of the co-authors of a book that you just got to get and read. It's called Crimes of the Educators, and he joins us. Alex, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Josh.
Thank you for joining us. Now, what's your take? Let's just get a broad picture view first. What's your take on the American educational system?
I think the best way to summarize it is that, contrary to widespread misinformation and belief, what's happening is not an accident. What we show in the book is that this is deliberate. The reason why more than 55% of the American people can barely read is because there was a design to do that. It didn't happen by accident. It's not that they don't have enough hundreds of billions of dollars. It's that they're doing it on purpose, and they're dumbing down our children, and they dumbed us down. And there's a very sinister agenda behind it all that goes beyond just, producing illiterate, uneducated people. It's a very sinister agenda, and people need to know about it and understand it if we're going to have any hope of fixing this problem.
Is this why Common Core and Agenda 21 are such key words to people who are paying attention?
It's exactly right, and actually, people don't realize that there's a link between the two. They're two huge problems, each on their own. But it's all interrelated, and that's one of the things we try to show in our book. In the beginning, we talk about where this all came from. We start with John Dewey more than 100 years ago with his admitted plan to destroy the literacy of the American people, and his goal. He told us what his goal was, to move America towards collectivism and socialism. But then we fast forward, going through the whole thing, going up to today with Common Core. And then we show where this is all going. And the amazing thing is none of this is a secret. All of the documents are posted online. We cite primary source documents straight from the UN website, straight from the U.S. Department of Education. And, they're telling us where they're moving this all toward. The only problem is the media hasn't connected the dots. So Arne Duncan, just to give you an example of Common Core and the Agenda 21, the sustainability program of the United Nations, Arne Duncan was giving some speeches, one to a sustainability summit and another to UNESCO, and he was bragging about how the federal government is taking over the schools, literally, and using them to produce the next generation of green citizens for the new green world order, where we're all going to work in green jobs. Ask any parent. It doesn't matter if they're the most, brainwashed, Obama-loving zombie. They don't send their kids to school for their kids to be turned into green global citizens. They send them there so they can learn how to read, so they can do math, the basic things that people expect from their schools. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is a program of indoctrination and of dumbing down that's very deliberate and is no accident.
So, okay, so there's so many things to dig in here. I mean, obviously, one, if you need more reasons to become a homeschooling family, here you go. Two, how do we know that this is actually happening when some of us believe, well, look at how smart we are. I mean, we're the smartest generation ever on the planet Earth. Everybody has the plethora of human knowledge in the palm of their hand through their smartphones. Come on now, Alex. How can you say that we're being dumbed down?
We figured we were going to get challenges like that. And so one of the things we spent a long time doing was just going through the objective data, stuff that nobody can argue against because it's not subjective, it's not interpretation, it's not an opinion. So to give you an example, we looked at SAT scores going back to like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s. And what you find is about every 10 years or so, they do what they call recentering the test. And that sounds innocent enough, right? Recenter the test. But what they really are doing, and it's no secret that this is going on, is they're dumbing down the test, because what they find is the scores continue to drop. It's to the point now today where the smart kids today are dumber than the dumb kids back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So we have this objective data showing very clearly that the educational decline is accelerating. It's a crisis now. And the federal government's own numbers show this. I mean, to give you another example, in 1993, they did a literacy survey, and the federal government itself said 55% of Americans can barely read. How can it be that we're spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars per government-educated student, and they're graduating without being able to read their college or their high school diploma? I taught my 4-year-old how to read using Sam Blumenfeld's book with phonics in a matter of weeks. So it doesn't cost all this money. It's very simple to teach someone to read, and when they can read, they can educate themselves. They can read their constitutions and their Bibles and their Declaration of Independence and their history. But what they're doing in the schools is actually deliberately making sure that they can't read. They started using, at John Dewey's suggestion, this new method of reading that they knew was quackery. They had done experiments with it in the 1800s, and they knew that it didn't work at all, except for a very small subset of the population. It's called the look-say method or the sight method. There's a number of different buzzwords they use. But basically, they stopped teaching how to read English the way that it has always been done. Our language, is a phonetic language. You look at the letters, and you know what sound the letters make, and out of that, you make a word. The way they're teaching the kids now, the closest comparison is it's kind of like reading Chinese. You look at a symbol or a word in English, and from that you get the idea of what the word is supposed to represent. And this is not how you teach the English language. And it works for some people, so that's why we still have, some people who can read, homeschoolers, and some private schools still educate the proper way. But, for the vast majority of people, this is not working. It's producing dyslexia. It's producing widespread illiteracy. And if you can't read, you're going to be ignorant. It's as simple as that.
What's the objective? Why are they doing it?
Well, John Dewey actually told us his objective more than 100 years ago. He pointed to a novel. It was Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy in 1888. And this was a fantasy about America in the year 2000. He thought it was a great idea, this collectivist, totalitarian, kind of communist dictatorship of a society where everybody was just so brainwashed that, they thought it was great. And that's what John Dewey wanted to move us toward. That's what he told us. And he knew that would never happen as long as people could read. He considered reading to be a very individualistic activity because you do it, in your own mind. So he wanted to move toward a social focus. Everything needed to be social. And he had an essay called The Primary Education Fetish, where he said, we got to get rid of this idea that everybody needs to learn how to read and they need to learn how to read young. But we got to do it slowly and carefully. Change must come gradually, because to force it unduly would favor a violent reaction that would jeopardize its success. So why would it favor a violent reaction if people figured out what was going on? Well, because, America was the most literate society on earth back then. Everybody needed to read so they could read their Bibles and their history and, all of the documents and the writings that have come down to us through the ages about our civilization, about our history and our culture. And his agenda was to move America toward this vision of a socialist, communist, collectivist society. If you fast forward all the way up to today with the Common Core people and the UNESCO, UNESCO, for example, has its own World Core curriculum, they call it. Bill Gates signed an agreement with them in 2004 to develop a master global curriculum. And that's what they're moving toward right now. And they actually explicitly tell you that to achieve sustainability, we need less education, because educated people have higher incomes, they consume more resources. So we got to put a stop to all that stuff. So UNESCO is running around pushing pornographic sex education, this look-say faulty reading method, new math that we call it, and what they call value shifting. And they tell you explicitly in their documents that changes in values, beliefs, and attitudes are required to move us toward this new global society that they want. And that's what they're doing in our schools. Now, the American people, it doesn't matter what kind of politics you have. People don't send their kids to school for that purpose, but that is what is happening in the schools, and people need to know about it if we're going to, first of all, protect our children, but more broadly, save our civilization, save our society, save our liberties.
Oh, exactly, and that's why I promote and defend homeschooling so much, because it's one of those things where so many parents now view public school as basically the right thing to do. Okay, I'll just trust the teachers. They know what they're talking about. And to be honest, a place to keep the kids for 8 hours a day. So it's kind of like a babysitter too. It's like a babysitter that teaches. We'll just put them in there, and they don't pay attention to what they're actually being taught, nor do they pay attention to how dangerous it is. Not only are they teaching this Common Core Agenda 21 social engineering stuff, dumbing down the populace, but it's just dangerous. There was a Slate article that came out that said 4.5 million students that are currently in K through 12 have been sexually abused by an educator. That makes the Catholic sex abuse scandal look like a drop in the ocean, but yet we refuse to talk about it because we hold teaching and teachers in such high esteem that even though it's happening, we still send our kids to school the next day. So stay where you're at, Alex. We're just touching the surface on this. I want to talk a little bit more about it when we get back. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be back right after this. All right, second hour, Josh Tolley Show, GCN Radio Network, 1-800-259-5791 is the phone number. Make sure you get your copy of Evangelpreneur. We have been busy getting out all of the pre-orders this week. I've been signing so many books, I'm getting writer's cramp. But it's okay. If you want one, just go to the website, joshtolley.com, and you can get one there. So let's get back to this conversation, because we're talking to Alex Newman. He's the author or the co-author of a great new book that you have to get, Crimes of the Educators. And Alex, we have a lot of homeschoolers who listen to this show and use Evangelpreneur as part of their teaching curriculum. So a lot of these people are listening to this show because of the very things you're saying. However, not enough of them, in my opinion, are making that decision to homeschool. You are giving great reasons why. And I want to kind of get back into this idea of what's the cause behind this? What effects does it have? And when I was reading the information about having you on today, one of the interesting things I saw was a connection between the teaching system and the rise of a diagnosis of dyslexia when it comes to reading. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, let me address your homeschooling point. I think it's huge, Josh. You're right on the money here. Parents have a responsibility to protect their children from this lunacy. So, homeschooling, I think, is probably the best route that parents can go at this point. Even a lot of the Christian schools and the private schools and the Catholic schools are moving toward Common Core, and even some of them through good intentions. They're not setting out to do it deliberately, but when the education establishment says this is the only way, and all the textbook publishing houses publish this nonsense, I mean, it's hard to escape it. So parents, homeschooling is really, at this point, probably your best option if you can find a way to do it. And if not, there's resources out there to help you. There's even an online school that I teach at. There's all kinds of stuff out there. But get your kids out of the public schools. Find a way to do it. Everybody can do it somehow. Even single parents I know can do it. And it's just so important. Now, to address the dyslexia thing, this is such a huge scandal. And the fact that it's received no attention, I think, is very telling. As you know, Sam has been in this for probably 60 years. His career has been devoted to exposing the crimes of the educators. This book is kind of, the compilation of 60 years of original research, of unbelievably massive research efforts and work. And what he shows in this book, in the sections that we deal with dyslexia, is that dyslexia is being caused by this faulty reading method and by what they're doing in the government schools. It's not an accident. It's not some kind of disease. It's a brain damage that results from trying to learn how to read using this nonsense technique where, again, I talked about on the last segment, you're teaching kids to read English as if it were Chinese. So rather than learning phonics and decoding what's in a word based on the sounds that the letters make, they just kind of memorize what word, a symbol, what it's supposed to represent. Like cat is, they come up with an image of a cat. And that doesn't work. Our brains are not wired that way. Our language is not made to be read like that. And that produces dyslexia. And one of the things that I think is most amazing is that Sam has had some success curing people of their dyslexia. So, the schools tell them, oh, you have dyslexia, you're reading disabled, you're learning disabled for your whole life. Mm-hmm. Sam has found that you can actually reverse that. Now, it's not an easy process. You essentially have to unlearn something that your brain has made almost reflexive, and that is looking at a word as a symbol and then decoding it like that. But it is possible. What you need is intensive phonics. phonics, and actually Sam did a really good book, the one that I used to teach my 4-year-old how to read, and it's actually a very simple matter to do it if you just put a little bit of time in it. You need intensive phonics, and you need to unlearn the faulty way of reading that was taught to you in the government schools, and you can actually become not reading disabled or learning disabled or whatever label the government schools want to give you. And so for me, this is one of the most fascinating elements of the research that we've put together here, because there's so many people who have, supposed learning disabilities and supposed reading disabilities, and then parents feel ashamed and the kids feel stupid. It's just child abuse. They're damaging children's brains, and that's the case that we make in the book. The schools are, quite literally damaging and destroying human beings. They're taking perfectly normal children, perfectly smart children who are capable of doing anything they set their minds to, and they're dumbing them down, and they're literally harming their brain. Brain damage is what's going on when you try to teach the kids to read using this ridiculous method that has known to be quackery. It's been known to be quackery since the 1800s when they first did experiments with it.
Well, and I absolutely agree, and I only have you for about 4.5 more minutes. So I want to talk a little bit, too, about the indoctrination, because I have seen math classes that teach an anti-gun message. I have seen history classes teach messages that aren't even true. Can you kind of talk about the message behind it, not just the dumbing down?
Yeah, I mean, it has infected, like you said, literally every component of education. It doesn't matter, and I found this to be true when I went to university here too. I took a business English class, and my professor, the first thing he said was, "Hi, everybody, I'm a Marxist." And it's like, okay, what does that have to do with business English? But in the government schools, it's going on all day, every day, and there are still some good teachers out there in the government schools. Unfortunately, a lot of them are resigning or being fired in the face of Common Core because they just won't submit. But the indoctrination has infected all the textbooks, every single class. If you're looking at science, they're teaching the kids absolute quackery. Your life is no more important than a goldfish. You came from slime, and there is no morality. And this is the kind of stuff they're teaching in science classes. In history, they're teaching just all fake history. America started out as genocide, evil, horrible place, and thank goodness we have feminists and the welfare state and our loving government overlords to protect us. They teach the kids literally that the Second Amendment is made to protect the quote-unquote right of the military to have guns. And the kids are so dumbed down that, they don't even realize that this is total nonsense. Anybody with 2 brain cells should be able to say you wouldn't write a Second Amendment to protect the right of a military to keep and bear arms. But this is the stuff that passes for education, and it's, across the board, whether we're talking about pornographic sex education to kindergartners or, fake history lessons, fake civic lessons. They never do anything on the Constitution. There's no understanding of the Declaration of Independence or our God-given rights, and it's all by design.
Oh, and then, of course, you have the police and schools aspect, and there's been a number of great articles out talking about how there are so many kids now that are being arrested for what you would normally just get detention for. We covered a story earlier this week of a kid who would normally, clean the blackboards or stay after school, but instead was arrested, taken to juvenile court by a cop for being disruptive in class. So there's that element, too, of this almost berating and just pushing down of children being children.
Oh my goodness! They're training our children to live in a police state, and that's exactly what's going on in every school across this country. They're getting used to the notion that they constantly have to submit to searches with no warrants. They're getting them used to the notion that they have to obey instantly on command anything that comes from some kind of government official, and they're just completely removing their individuality. They're making sure that they have no understanding of individual rights and how a free society is supposed to operate. And the only place this can end is tragedy, unless people get up and do something, get educated about the problem, and set out to fix it.
So where do they get the book?
The best place is Amazon.com, or they can get it through Walmart or Target. WND Superstore is selling them as well, and you can even get autographed copies there. But it's widely available. But I say Amazon is good because it's a little bit cheaper, and then reviews and all that kind of good stuff helps us out as well. We really want to get the message out more than anything.
Especially, at this time when the school year is ending, parents now have a few months to make a decision on what they're going to do with the future education of their children.
Yeah, and I hope this book will help parents make the right decision, because I think after you read this with an open mind, after you look at the bibliography and see that this is all documented in the primary sources, parents, will have to say, hey, I'm not going to subject my children to this. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to our society and our country and our civilization. And, parents, we have a responsibility over our children, and we cannot subject them to this. So I hope parents will read the book and make the right decision.
Alex Newman, thank you so much for joining us. Crimes of the Educators is the book. Get a copy, read it, share it with everybody else. We'll be back right after this. Hey, thanks for watching. If you loved what I had to say, then subscribe right here. If you hated what I had to say, subscribe right here. It's fun being mad on social media, isn't it? Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email right there.